This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 341, Mentoring at DrupalCon. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Today, we're talking about mentoring at DrupalCon with AmyJune Hineline. AmyJune is an Erin Winborn Award winner, Senior Community Manager for OpenSource.com at Red Hat. She works in the Drupal contribution space as a mentor, initiative lead, and runs first-time contributor workshops at the local, regional, and national level. AmyJune is also on the CWG, Community Working Group, Community Health Team. She has a magical life away from Drupal, and she enjoys music festivals, that was together, and gallivanting in the woods looking for lost treasure. AmyJune, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm John Picozzi, and today my co-hosts are Nick Laughlin.
Good afternoon. Happy to be here.
And joining us for the second time, Mike Anello, who is a Drupal developer and trainer at and co-owner of DrupalEasy.com. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey now, thank you.
So let's jump right into our module of the week. So I found this one a little earlier this week, actually. The use case for me was I needed jump links in Layout Builder. So I did what I normally do, went to Google and searched for Layout Builder, Drupal Layout Builder jump links, I think was the query. And I got this module, the Layout Builder Section Navigation module. So the Drupal project name, for those who are wondering, LB_section_navigation. What it does, super simple. It adds a new block available to you in Layout Builder that displays a list of anchor links for the components of the same section. So basically, if you think about Layout Builder, if you have a section, you put a bunch of different components in that section, and then you pull this block out of your tray and put it into that section. It's going to take all of those component titles and turn them into essentially a jump menu. It worked right out of the box. Like I did a little POC with it, and it worked. It worked great. The only downfall, I would say, if I had to identify a downfall, was that the anchor links, it uses the UUID as opposed to like a clean name of some sort. So if you wanted to like link to that specific jump point in the page via, you would have to use the UUID, which kind of can be a little bit long and un-SEO friendly. But I'm assuming you could probably patch your way around that pretty easily. Otherwise, I think it worked pretty well. One limitation that I did think of for my use case was it doesn't necessarily allow for multiple components to be in an area. So if you were kind of building a complex layout, you wouldn't be able to put multiple components in there without it creating individual jump links.
I have to say, I've literally never heard anybody call these jump links, and I'm surprised at that. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's one of the things that people probably always call them. I've only ever heard them called anchor links.
No, I agree with you. When I hear jump link, I think of like a select box with a bunch of options. And when you select an option, you jump to that option.
No, you guys are right. So I mean, anchor links are the actual anchor on the page. Anchor links. So I mean, I guess they could be considered anchor links, but yeah, typically jump links kind of work the same way. So I mean, I think it's probably a little bit interchangeable depending on what your terminology is. But
so let me ask a question about this. So let's say you have a layout builder section that has 3 columns, and you've got one column in one block in each of those 3 columns. Is that going to display 3 jump links, or is that the complex situation you mentioned?
So that's a great question. I would imagine that it would display 3 jump links, even though that's columns,
No,
not.
I don't think so, because sections are each grouping, whereas those would be 3
Yeah, but
regions
the
in one
layout,
section.
but the layout of that section could be 3 columns, and the
Yeah.
module is pulling component titles basically. So yes, my
Oh.
feeling is that it would not respect the fact that they are all on the same line and would try to create jump links for each of them.
And then taking this one step further, let's say you're using something like Bootstrap paragraphs, where you have like an accordion set and then an accordion, and you kind of put that into never mind. That's the too complex issue.
Yeah, you get IDs for each one at each level.
Yeah, never mind. I withdraw the question, Your Honor.
So the module works really great for like a simple use case. I can see it being very useful, but yeah, I thought it was could be a simple solution for potential jump link menu if need be. So moving into our primary topic, let's talk about mentoring at DrupalCon. And let's just start off with an overview. AmyJune, what's going on at DrupalCon with regards to mentoring?
So DrupalCon is our, annual North American event. We have a couple of them a year, sometimes 3 when Asia opens back up. And the whole idea about DrupalCon is getting people together to, move our project forward, learn some new skills, network, and all that kind of stuff. And some folks who come to DrupalCon have never contributed before. And so the idea behind mentoring is getting those people who either historically haven't mentored before, or maybe it's not part of their role in whatever they're doing, like say they're on a sales team or they're in human resources, how do we get these people involved? And then even programmers, and designers who have been in Drupal a long time, sometimes haven't had the privilege of time to contribute before or have the resources to find out how to do it on their own. And so we have several mentoring events coming up to help onboard people into that contribution process. And the thing about this DrupalCon that's so special is it's the first in-person DrupalCon with the new workflow of merge requests. So I have a feeling we're going to have people who have contributed to Drupal before, but don't know that new process and need a couple of helping hands, learning that new step.
Shameless self-promotion. There's a great Drupal Providence video where Tim Lennon goes through that process for anybody that wants to brush up on that before they get to DrupalCon.
And there'll be a series of first-time contributor workshops, and they're segmented. So people can either watch them online through the open social platform that we had during the virtual cons, or maybe they don't want to sit through the whole first-time contributor workshops and just want to see a segment of it. We're going to have those videos split up for people. And one of those is like a 10-minute video on merge requests. But we found a lot of people really appreciate being in a room with other people and having mentors in the room at a table group, really helping them with hands-on versus just watching a video. I'm not saying your video is not great, but that in-person element is really important sometimes to some folks.
Absolutely.
So can you tell us a little bit about why you think mentoring is so important?
Okay, so when I think of Drupal and why things are important, I always go back to the values and principles behind Drupal. And one of our really core values of Drupal is fostering a learning environment, because, and I'm going to use code as an example here, code contributions is hard. So when you have an environment where we sort of relax things and we show people that, our core contributors and our maintainers are human and we all make mistakes, but, having a space where everyone feels safe to ask questions, it's that fostering that learning environment, because not everyone feels comfortable and confident asking questions. And when you have a group of new contributors around, it helps break down those barriers to even asking that first question, knowing that you're in a room with people who are in a similar place as you. And so mentoring, we really value, making sure that people know that they can be vulnerable. People know that they can go outside of their comfort zone, that they can make mistakes, and that's that core value of fostering them the learning environment.
So I feel like I was giving the softball question of all softball questions. So get ready for this nice meatball coming your way. How can people help out? What do you need? Like, what does, when you get there the day of the event, like what type of people are you hoping are there to help out?
Okay, so I'm going to lob that meatball back in time a little bit and talk about what we need before DrupalCon and moving into DrupalCon, because mentoring is really, teaching people how to, use their skills and their passions to move the project forward. But also there's the idea that you have to be this like expert person to mentor. And I really want to break down that idea, because you don't have to be an expert to be a mentor. You just have to be a person that can show someone something that they don't know. Because I think Kathy Thies said this a while back, that you always know something more than someone else. And so with mentoring, I think some folks have this idea that you have to be this big time contributor to be able to mentor, but that's not the case. Like what we're looking for is we're looking for people, to come into the mentoring channel in the Drupal Slack space, attend a couple of meetings and understand what it is that we're expecting at DrupalCon. And so that's kind of the first step, is like kind of introducing yourself to other mentors and forming in like a bond and a network with other people who are already there. That way, when you get there, you know people and you have these expectations. But day one of DrupalCon, we have some birds of a feather going on that are pre-allocated to us. One of them is issue queue triage, because sometimes the hardest part about giving back to Drupal is figuring out what issue to work on. And so the idea of mentors is like really breaking down issue summaries and making sure that they're clear instructions, how to expectations, how to replicate the issues, road to validation and things like that. So we have a BOF for issue queue triage. And then we also have a BOF of like intro to mentoring. We have like a mentor the mentoring sort of BOF that first Monday. And then Tuesday we have the booth. And so we have booth space available where we are going to recruit mentors, and we're going to talk to people and flag them down and say, hey, why don't you come on Wednesday and Thursday and help in the mentoring space and answer any questions? So that's going to be a valuable space for people who are interested in mentoring, is coming to the booth and asking mentors, what do I have to do and what's the process and what the expectations are, because the expectations are different for everyone. There's all different kinds of roles. So there's all different places that people can kind of fit into slots at DrupalCon. Does that answer the question?
Yeah,
okay.
A little too much, but okay. No, so I mean, that's a lot, right? So when an answer has that much information, my fear is that it's going to intimidate potential mentors. So let me ask this another way. Let's say someone's at DrupalCon and they realize, oh, you know what? I have nothing going on for half a day on Friday. Could they just show up at the mentoring event and be put to work?
Well, not on Friday, because DrupalCon's not happening on Friday, but
okay. Well, I would have to consult the calendar to get better information, but go ahead.
Wednesday and Thursday, there's half-day events revolving around mentor contributions. And yes, they can just show up and there'll be someone there to be like, what's your skill set? What's your passion? What are you interested in doing? And they'll kind of float you in the right direction. And then just because you get into one room doesn't mean you have to stay there all day. There's a first time contribution room, and then there's like mentored space. People sort of graduate throughout the day, so there's different spaces where people can contribute for mentoring. And there's things like being a greeter, or talking to people as they're coming to the event and figuring out where they will be comfortable in that contribution space. And so that's a great activity too, is just being like, hey, do you know how to do X, Y, and Z? No, you can go to the first time contributor workshop. After that, there's this mentored room. And so there's a whole bunch of different roles that people can do that during those half-day events too.
why do people become mentors? What's in it for them?
What's in it for them? Well, as an Aaron Winborn Award winner, sorry, Mike.
It's funny, I didn't catch that in your bio.
Well, it's about the greater good, right? You know, as humankind, I'm going to like extrapolate a little bit. It's about doing the right thing, and we're really passionate about our project. And if you have given back before, you know, it's important to foster that environment for other people. And the feeling that you get when you mentor, it's incredible. You know, there's attributions and that kind of thing, but that it just feels good to sit with someone. And even if you just share a link to the contributor list, you know, or contributor tasks, and then next year at DrupalCon or 6 months from now, when you check in with them on Slack, seeing their progress is just fantastic. You know, just that it's a lot of warm and fuzzies, I think.
But I think it shouldn't be dismissed that when you explain something to somebody else, you not only, you know, gain some more knowledge, you also gain confidence in that topic. So, you know, there's nothing wrong at all with looking to get something out of being a mentor, because you're going to give something. If you're a mentor, by definition, you're giving. But it's okay to want to, like you said, AmyJune, to like get a really good feeling out of it, but also gain confidence out of it. And that makes you a better developer, site builder, event organizer, whatever you are.
And that's true, because when I first got into contributions, I'm still not a programmer. I know some code and that kind of thing, but every time I teach a class, I do learn more. You know, every time I give a presentation on like even issue queue triage, I have to like learn about all the ins and outs of issue queue triage more than I did before, because I want to feel confident giving that. But that's true. Like the learning curve, they always say, what is it? That if you want to learn something, you teach it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's accurate. I mean, part of it is when you're teaching something, you have to think through it from a different angle. But also, I mean, just the simple fact, you know, people will ask questions that are outside the use case that you're used to sometimes. So you have to think through a new problem, and solving a new problem can help.
And you know, I definitely agree with what AmyJune and Mike said. I mean, I think, you know, for somebody to, you know, it has to be worth somebody's time to be a mentor, right? And there's so many things that you can get out of it. I know, you know, when I have mentored individuals, like it and AmyJune touched on this, right? It pushes the community forward. It helps, you know, it gives back to, you know, to a community that essentially helped you when you were just starting off, right? So it's like, it's kind of like the open source community circle of life, right? You're by mentoring, you're helping elevate somebody else to your level.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, mentoring, like many things, the open source community is built on volunteers, right? And mentoring is just volunteering to teach somebody to volunteer, right? And so it's helping, you know, raise up the next group of contributors.
It's modeling behavior as well.
Exactly. So I guess the next question for me then is, you had mentioned, AmyJune, I think Kathy had said that everybody knows something more than somebody else. So that's something valuable that they can pass on. If you're thinking about becoming a mentor, how do you go about finding out where that value is? How do you find out what's something that you can provide as a mentor?
So I think that's really individual, you know, because it does for me, mentoring like sparks my skill set. And then a lot of the things that I mentor are also aligned with my passions. So, you know, sometimes, you know, aligning your passions and skill set is the first thing to do, and think about what you're passionate about, because it's easier to teach something that you're passionate about. You know, we all use the software a little bit differently. So there's a space for everybody to share that skill set and that passion. but as far as like individual skills, maybe we there's documentation on Drupal.org that kind of breaks down different things that are helpful in the contributor guide. And I think I've misplaced the question a little bit. So can you ask it again, Nick?
Sure. So if you're considering mentoring, how do you find where your place is, like where your value add to the community is, how you can help?
Okay. So there can be two different thought processes here. There's the mentoring at DrupalCon versus the mentoring in the general public, because mentoring at DrupalCon, we sort of focus on that core contributions. We don't always have like tables for marketing or tables for design and things like that. So mentoring at DrupalCon is more code centric. But with saying that, there's spaces to, contribute back to documentation, and there's spaces to contribute back to design. You just have to find those spaces in the general contribution room or call that out. But as far as like where you go to find out, a lot of it is talking with other folks, joining that mentoring channel in Drupal Slack. Say you're good at, local development. We have a need for people who can help with local tooling. We have a need for people who can help set people up with the browser-based tooling. Documentation is always a good place to start when you're new or a novice to anything. And that's very much the case for mentoring too. At Florida Drupal Camp, I had a couple of folks who wanted to start contributing to DrupalCon. And so I said, well, the first place maybe is to audit our mentoring documentation. And that way you're learning as you go, but you're also helping us because you're a fresh eyes on this documentation and you can see what we're missing. There's any skills that are missing. There's any steps to the processes that are missing.
Interesting.
But also you're learning at the same time. So that's my kind of go-to is like, how do I learn more and how do I contribute at the same time? It's like going through that documentation and really, finding your place. And, and like I said, the documentation has gaps in it. And so, someone who has a passion or a skill set and they're like, well, there's nothing there. They can come back to one of us mentors and say, there's nothing there for me. And we can do that exploration of what are you passionate about? And we can add that as a task or as a role.
Interesting. That's fascinating, actually.
So I think we've talked about, what mentoring can do kind of at the small level, like for the mentor and the mentee, like how it can help the mentor and the mentee. And I think you've also talked about how it helps the overall community, the greater community, which is a very big thing, right? So is there middle ground there? Like, are there areas where mentoring is making a big impact that is bigger than individual impacts, but smaller than like the community?
Well, I'm not sure if this is middle ground or even bigger than the community, but I work in the general open source community and I work in the WordPress space a lot. And I use the mentoring program as a model for other communities. Just as I've taken from the WordPress community, their idea of non-code contributions at contribution days, and I've added that into how I teach classes and what I talk about. I've also taken the code part of Drupal and introduced it to other communities about how that's important, because we have these really special tools that lower the barriers to entry, like Simply Test Me and DrupalPod that other communities don't have. And so when other communities have their contribution days and they set up for code contributions, it can take someone a whole day just to get their local environment set up, where we have, like I said, Simply Test Me or GetPod, and we have something in 5 minutes. So I've been taking that to like the wider community and trying to write articles on opensource.com where we talk about these frameworks and tools that lower the barriers to entry. So that's, I know, outside of the scope of Drupal, but mentoring the mentor in any space, like if you can mentor in one space, I'm pretty confident you can mentor in another. And what makes me confident in that is we're all human. And when we mentor, I'm going to use NEDCamp as an example. One of my first contribution talks was at NEDCamp a few years ago. And I was with Daniel Rose and we were giving a presentation on how to write a patch. And the patch was empty. And it was like, oh, crud. But we used that as a learning opportunity to troubleshoot. And so those people not only learned how to write a patch, but they learned to troubleshoot when their patch was empty. And so I think like that vulnerability of mentoring can be carried on through all of those spaces, doing those live demos, doing those live workshops, and really shows people that you're human. And I think that's really important beyond the mentoring part. Like people see that you're human and they're like, oh, well, I never wanted to give a live demo before because I was afraid of this mistake. Well, AmyJune just went up there and she was okay. And she did this troubleshooting. And now I can give that live demo on X, Y, and Z when I present on something else. And so mentoring has this like, just this impact of that human edge, I think, because we're all vulnerable when we mentor. Because I'm at that table group and I'm showing someone how to do it. And I'm like, you know what? Like Nick said, that is beyond the scope of my knowledge, but let's figure it out together. And I think people learn those skills in that can be taken to the wider community as well.
Yeah, my students love seeing me fail. Mm-hmm. Like during office hours and during class, they love it when something goes wrong. Because, they enjoy the process of watching me figure out what went wrong and rectifying it. And it's something like, it can't be planned, but it's a great, it's normally a very helpful thing. And AmyJune, I really like the way you reframed the question. I was thinking, small, medium, large, and you turned it into like internal versus external. And that's something I don't think the community does enough of, taking these great things that we have in our community and talking about them outside of the community.
It's interesting because you were asking about that question, Mike, in our chat, and in my as you asked the question in my head, I kind of had this visual of like waterfall, right? So like you start off with a mentor-mentee relationship, and the mentor maybe helps the mentee solve a problem, right? And then that problem or that solution can kind of cascade into I'm thinking of like I've done a number of talks on like config management, right? And config management is really confusing for people, rightfully so, because there's some nuances there. And like sometimes you just see that and how it flows through the community where people are like, oh, I have this question or I have that question. And mentoring can potentially solve a bigger issue. And then that bigger issue could potentially be something that flows outside of the community. A follow-up question there, AmyJune, with the the greater community and the mentoring stuff outside of the community that you're doing, would you say that the Drupal community specifically around mentoring is kind of a leader in the mentoring space and is an example for a lot of other communities? Or
I don't think I'm qualified enough for that, to be honest, because I only mentor in a couple of communities. I think that we all can learn from each other, like I said. So, the thing about Drupal mentoring is like, there's the one-off events where you can be a mentor at your local event. You come to Bad Camp and you mentor at Bad Camp, or say you go to a couple of events of a year, or you just go to DrupalCon. But then there's this idea of the mentors that mentor all year long. And I don't know if a lot of communities have that. We work on our tools all year long. We work on our processes. We work on recruitment. We work on mentoring the mentors all year long. And so there's all different levels of engagement that you can have when you say that you're a mentor. You can mentor like for classes, like Mike Anello has this class called Drupal Easy. Y'all might have heard of it. There's an opportunity to mentor students there, the Discover Drupal program. There's an opportunity to mentor people there. And mentoring can go beyond those code contributions too. Mentoring can be, first-time attendees at DrupalCons, or first-time attendees at workshops, or first-time attendees at camps. You can have a mentor kind of help them navigate the process of figuring out what schedule they're going to go to, that kind of thing. And so that's what I think is unique about the Drupal community is we work on it all year long, and we really celebrate our mentors too. We have them on in our code base named as mentors, not just our maintainers of the project, but we have a list in our maintainers.txt file of our mentors. And so there's a celebration that happens, I think, a lot in Drupal with our mentors, which I think is really important. It really helps with that, that feel good process as well.
And you can find out more about Discover Drupal in episode 336, if you're wondering what that is.
And I think that one of the interesting things too, and this part, it definitely isn't unique to the Drupal space, but Drupal is recognizing that mentoring somebody is a learned skill as well. So I think something that a lot of people think is if somebody's good at something, that means they're good at teaching or good at mentoring. But both of those are skills separate from whatever you're mentoring. And as you said, Drupal is investing in teaching that skill to people that are qualified to teach. Well, I think Kathy's right. Everybody's qualified to teach something, but you need to teach them how to.
Well, you don't necessarily have to teach to be a mentor. You can work on the tools, you can work on the documentation, there's other parts of mentoring beyond the teaching one-on-one thing. So I think that's a really valuable concept that a lot of people might not be aware of, is there's other ways to get involved besides that one-on-one or one to a group participation level. So,
I mean, in reality, listening, it could be a mentorship opportunity, right? Listening and offering an opinion, or just having a conversation about something.
And networking too can be a good mentoring activity. The more you mentor at different events and the more you attend contribution days, the more people you know. And so when people come up to you and have that specific question of how do I do X, Y, and Z, you'll know more people and you can point them in that right direction, so you don't always have to teach, but maybe just being aware of who else can teach.
Makes sense.
And then last time I was on the show, we talked about the mentoring summit that we had at the end of the summer. And that was an opportunity where we were teaching the mentors, mentoring the mentors so they could come. And that's something we want to do on a either a yearly basis or a bi-yearly basis, where we have these opportunities for mentors to all come together and learn those skills of like issue queue triage. That's a mentoring task that you can do without having to do that one-on-one, because we all know that people interact with people differently, so I just want to make it really clear to folks that you don't have to have that one-on-one interaction to mentor. And then you can mentor on Slack too. So if you don't want to do like the video calls or you don't want to do in-person events, there's that opportunity to mentor, on the text-based forum too.
Yeah, that all makes perfect sense to me. You hinted at this a little bit earlier, but I want to kind of ask Chloe, one of the things I think Drupal does really well is, especially over the last few years, it started recognizing non-code contributions with contribution credits. Particularly at Drupal.org. And I'm curious if someone who's going to mentor at DrupalCon, are they going to get credited as well?
Yeah, so we have a mentoring issue queue outside of the Drupal core issue queue. And so as we organize events, when people participate in meetings, when people show up, and do different things like documentation, we create new issues and people get credits for that. And then also, it's not something we do a lot, but as we help folks and we're mentoring folks at their table groups at DrupalCon, we're encouraging mentors to make a comment on those issues so they get credit too. Because a lot of times the people you're mentoring will make a comment and get the credit, but since the mentor is letting those folks that, the mentees do the work, they don't get the credit sometimes. So we're trying to encourage folks to make that statement and be like, yeah, I helped and I mentored during this issue, so they can get that core credit as well.
Interesting. And I think that's, for some people, it's probably a bit of a paradigm shift. I mean, it's one thing to feel, because sometimes as a mentor, you feel like it's not a material contribution, right? Like, hey, I didn't actually work on this issue or solve it. I just told somebody where to look for the solution. But that, I think one of the points you're making is that that is a valuable contribution. And so trying to normalize accepting or requesting credit for that kind of thing just encourages more of that as well.
And then also at the local events, I encourage the local events like Florida Drupal Camp or Bad Camp or Ned Camp or any of those to have an issue for contribution day for mentors. So people who help out and mentor at their specific event can get the credits too. Because we don't always do that. We do the planning contribution credits in the mentoring queue, but then the people who volunteer at the event who mentor, that's more of a camp space sort of thing, you know? And so we encourage folks to open those issues at that local and regional level too. And then also the way Drupal.org kind of redid their UI lately is you can go in and you can select in your Drupal.org profile what you do, and it shows up as a badge that you do mentoring, and it shows up on your organization's page. If you volunteer through an organization, it'll show that you are a core mentor and things like that. And then, you know, there are badges like for mentors for Discover Drupal, and it shows up on your profile page. So they're doing a few more things in the Drupal.org profile space to help illuminate when people help out with things that don't necessarily get contribution credits.
So is there an effort to turn, you know, all these mentors that show up for DrupalCons in the past, and I'm going to assume in the future, is there an effort to turn them, or maybe, I think that the answer is going to be yes, but so like maybe what is the effort to turn these periodic mentors into more regular mentors? You know, kind of a one-time mentor versus a monthly or periodic mentor.
So that is the goal, is to have people come back, because the more often people come back, you know, the more skills that they have, the more they hone in, you know, and then there's, of course, the debt of mentoring the mentor isn't there if they're a return mentor. And so we encourage folks to come to like the social events that the mentors have, you know, like we always have the after dinner, or, you know, where we get together and we hang out in the booth and we make it a social experience too. That way it's fun. That way you meet people. We encourage folks to join the mentoring channel, where we talk all the time, and we have monthly meetings or fortnightly meetings, depending on the time of the year. You know, closer to the events, we meet more often, but we want to have that space where people can talk and do that. But we also acknowledge that it's volunteer based and time is a privilege. And so we don't want to make it too much of a mechanical process, because we still want to encourage the fun part and the volunteer part. You know, with anything, once it becomes a chore, the more likely people don't want to do it. And so we try to keep it a little bit more upbeat.
Yeah, people burn out without that personal connection. I mean, that's been a huge problem over the last few years. And well, I shouldn't say last few years. That's been a huge problem with any volunteer-based action for all of history.
I mean, I guess my question is that the norm, that like somebody only mentors like once a year at DrupalCon, or is not like once they do it once or twice, or do they not like then gravitate towards it more frequently?
It's all over the place, really. We have, you know, people who come to the meetings every week, you know, who can't necessarily participate at events, but they'll contribute to documentation or the tools, or, you know, a lot of it is ideation when we have the meetings of how are we going to solve this? What solution do we have for like X, Y, and Z, you know? And then I like to encourage folks at the camps I help with to come back every year. And I do that check-in, you know, a couple of months before the event. Oh, hey, remember last year when you helped with this? Do you want to help out this year? And then DrupalCon, we do that too. We have this spreadsheet that we utilize, and we call people and check in with them and see if they want to return. And we're hoping with the mentoring summit, if we have that more often, because we've only had it the once, that sort of encourages participation too virtually. That way people who don't always get to see each other or don't get to meet up in person, especially now, because some people are still nervous about meeting in person, or there's restrictions for where they live and that kind of thing. So having a space where it's open, you can come in at any time, you can leave at any time, I think is really helpful.
So I have to ask, what made you so passionate about mentoring?
Well, one of the only skills I had when I first started Drupal was how to make a patch. And I wanted to go to all of the events, and the particular agency I worked at said, the only way we're going to pay for you to go to an event is if you get a presentation accepted. And so I started being like, hey, can I lead first time contributor workshops? Can I give this talk? And so it was a passion for traveling that got me interested in mentoring, but also like I'm a mother, I'm a Sunday school teacher, I'm a nurse who teaches nursing assistants. So teaching is in my core being. And so when I moved into tech, there was this space that was a little bit empty because it didn't have all those warm and fuzzies I talked about early. Mm-hmm. So mentoring really fills that space for me. And I really like empowering and elevating people, especially from excluded communities, reaching out to people who might not have the benefit of time, or maybe, haven't been asked before. And I really like empowering other people to give back, because as much as like I can give back, I like the feeling of other people's giving back more than, it's above me. So
you mentioned briefly the Discover Drupal program, and we recently, as John alluded to, we recently had a show on it. I'm just curious about how that's working into mentoring at DrupalCon, because I know the students have a scholarship, I think, to go to DrupalCon, and I'm sure a lot of the mentors that have taken part in the Discover Drupal program are going as well. Are you planning anything with that program at DrupalCon?
So, okay. The Discover Drupal students finished their classes before the end of the year, and then their final project is contributing back to Drupal. And so we have some core mentors, not core mentors, but mentors in the Discover Drupal program who help them learn the contribution process. And that's what they've been doing since January. So we thought, how can we empower these folks to be involved in Drupal from the get-go? How do we encourage them to work for companies where contributions are important? So we're sort of instilling this contribution is really important aspect. It's, yes, you learn Drupal, but how does Drupal continue to exist? And so we had this idea of, okay, well, we can teach them how to do a merge request, but is that going to be enough? No. And so we're working with the project browser leads, Leslie and Chris, to bring the Discover Drupal students in on a couple of different levels. One, the project browser, I don't know if you've talked about this on the show, is this project to be able to help site builders and novices to Drupal navigate how to look for a contributed module. Well, the Discover Drupal students are the perfect people to have the listening interviews with, and so they contributed by looking at the interfaces and doing these interviews of how do you look for contributed modules? And then also we have them writing the READMEs and writing the contributor.md files, but they're part of an initiative. And I always tell people, sometimes when time is a privilege, being part of an initiative really helps out, because you can keep up weekly in the meetings. You don't always have to participate weekly, but you also have a network of people that you know week to week, people who have helped you in the past. And so that's how we've encouraged the project or the Discover Drupal students to get involved. And with the idea of when they go to contribution day at DrupalCon, they can help out in person with that project browser initiative because they know the maintainers, they know some of the contributors. And it just sort of is a real easy offboarding process, right? They're moving out of the Discover Drupal project and into the wider community, and they have that initiative to really help them out with those skill sets.
Fun fact, we have had a show on the project browser, and our guest host at that point in time was AmyJune.
Oh, was it? Oh. Oh yeah, Chris was on, wasn't he?
And
That was
listeners,
like-
there's a link in the show notes if you
That
want.
was way back in the summertime, that was ages ago.
I can't
So,
believe it's been
Yes.
that long.
I remember banana slugs were a hot
oh
topic.
yeah, I was
Hot
on
topic.
vacation then too. Yeah. Mhm.
I totally feel like that's something that would happen to me, where I talked about something, completely forgot about it, and then was abruptly reminded about it many months later.
I mean, that happens to everybody. I think it's just
Yeah.
a fact of life.
Yeah. All right. So AmyJune, let me let's try and bring this home here. So over the past two and a half years, I didn't want to think how long it's been, maybe just about 2 years since the pandemic started. All events went virtual. Mentoring events went virtual around DrupalCons and maybe some of the larger Drupal events. So is there anything that you and the other mentoring leads kind of learned during the pandemic, in virtual events that, you're going to be able to bring back to in-person events?
Well, yes, we did have a platform for virtual contributions, which was nice. The open social people helped us out and built a platform, and we still utilize that. We used it for Drupal contribution weekend. And what's nice about that is the geographical barrier is not there anymore. So people can meet. We use Big Blue Button for meetings. So people can meet and have that in-person feel there, so that's something that we're going to carry forward, is that virtual space. So people that can't come to events or want to have those more global events, they can participate and have a platform. And there's longevity with that because there's a history, there's chats, there's events that are stored in that open social platform.
So are you saying that that's going to be concurrent with DrupalCon, or is that platform just going to be available?
Platform is available.
Okay, so if a local organizer wants to utilize it, they can contact you or one of the mentoring leads and say, how do we utilize it?
And then if there's some mentors that want to use that platform who aren't going to DrupalCon, but DrupalCon, the core mentors are focused on making the event. We don't want to separate it out and run 2 events. We want to make sure that the DrupalCon event is the best that we can make it. So we're not focusing on that during DrupalCon, but someone else can do that if they want to.
Great. As always, AmyJune, it has been a pleasure having you discuss mentoring with us. So we thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Do you have questions or feedback? You can reach out to Talking Drupal on Twitter with the handle Talking Drupal, or via email at show@talkingdrupal.com. You can connect with our hosts and other listeners on the Drupal Slack and the Talking Drupal channel. If you're interested in show news, upcoming Drupal camps, local meetups, Chad's Book Corner, and Abby's bi-weekly game review, you can sign up for our newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
You can promote your Drupal community event on Talking Drupal. Learn more at talkingdrupal.com/camp promo.
Thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choosing Become a Patron.
Well, everyone, we have come to the end of another wonderful episode of Talking Drupal. AmyJune, if folks wanted to get a hold of you and talk about mentoring or learn more about opensource.com, how could they do that?
Well, for mentoring, there's the mentoring channel in Drupal Slack. That's a great place to introduce yourself and ask questions. I have the handle Volkswagen Chick across LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, all of those favorites. So people can feel free to reach out to me that way and talk about opensource.com or mentoring or Volkswagens or geocaching or punk rock shows or anything that sparks their interest.
Or banana slugs.
Or banana slugs.
There you go. Mike Anello, what about you?
My username is Ultimike, and you can find me at drupaleasy.com.
Nick Laughlin.
You can find me at Nixvan, NICXVAN, pretty much everywhere.
And I'm John Picozzi. You can find me on all the major social networks and Drupal.org at John Picozzi. And you can find out about EPAM at epam.com.
If you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking.